Conversations are about land back are now, for some reason, anti-white and racist conversations about, hey, our country is based on colonialism and literally the most successful genocidal project to have ever existed, where we quite literally wiped a whole ethnicity off the face of the earth, according to good old Tucker Carlson, why the left is so anti-white. Let's get into this. Let's cringe really hard and blow our brains out, okay?
Somehow you were able to be airlifted directly or teleported directly from 1994 to 2024. You'd notice an awful lot of changes. Primary among them would be the internet. But the biggest change you probably
the internet, the great change of the interwebs, indeed.
About our public conversation is how white people were so...
By the way, if you want to know more about Tucker Carlson, I very much so encourage you to watch my actual video on Tucker Carlson. TLDR, he is the smartest, truly class-conscious, reactionary political commentator in the Western Hemisphere. This is a very dangerous and very intelligent human being who understands that for people like him in his position in the economic hierarchy to keep their position, the question of class must be diluted as much as fucking possible, because he does understand that capitalist society is built on the backs of the proletariat. That is class consciousness, just instead of engaging in it fully and being a good fucking human being at the end of the day and trying and embracing anti-capitalist rhetoric, that's not in his interest. So as compared to his classic thumbs that just, do it for the sake of getting extra money, which obviously he does as well, he actually knows how to, he has a set objective. And that objective is, again, to dilute class consciousness as much as possible in a drive to continue the status quo. But again, compared to his colleagues, he actually knows what he's doing, and that is why you don't need to fucking respect him, far from it, but that is why you need to understand that he is a different league of enemy as compared to the other ones. Grouping him up with classic Fox talking heads will be the death of you, trust me.
Openly attacked and denigrated, yes, a racial group. So in 1994, you were about 30 years past the Civil Rights Movement, and in 1994, the operating assumption of virtually everyone in the United States was the main lesson of the Civil Rights Movement, of the letter from the Birmingham jail and the Edmund Pettus Bridge and all the different sacred moments that we grew up hearing about. The main lesson of those moments was it is immoral, in fact unacceptable, to attack people on the basis of their race. So then if you fast forwarded 30 years to find the same country engaged in a public hate frenzy against people because of their race, you would find that bewildering. How did this happen? Of course, there would be the discrimination, the institutional racism of hurting people on the basis of their race in high...
The eternal classic. Let us use Martin Luther King to defend white people. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
This
one never gets old. This one absolutely fucking never gets old. Absolutely never gets old.
Missions to schools, in federal contracting, in promotions, there would be all of that. But there would also be the public manifestation of it. Of saying out loud, we just don't like you. You're not as good. You are morally defective because of your skin color. You say this about white people who founded the United States. You'd be shocked by that. And then to turn...
He says this, like this incredible hate frenzy in the United States, which like right now they would be able to clip 100 clips in like 20 seconds of this actively happening. But they don't have these clips because this is not actively happening. Okay.
On the TV and see the president of the United States do the very same thing, you'd think maybe you'd been drinking ayahuasca. You'd see Joe Biden say things like this.
History has thrust one more urgent task on us. Will we be the generation that finally wipes out the stain of racism from our national character? We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans. Racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. But a Black parent, no matter how wealthy or how poor they are, has to teach their child, when you're walking down the street, don't have a hoodie on when you go across the street.
Domestic terrorism from white supremacists is the most lethal.
This incredible anti-white agenda. Oh my God, who will stop Biden from what the he's just
terrorist threat in the homeland.
If I were your daughter, what advice would you give me the next time I am stopped by the police?
If you were my daughter, you'd be a Caucasian girl and you wouldn't be pulled over.
White supremacy is the most lethal threat to the United States. White people are the threat. They are evil and they are dangerous. That's not just a...
No, I can't believe I'm defending Biden. Biden is saying that there is discrimination against black people in absolutely every single quote you have just shown us, my dear friend. What the fuck does that have to do with anti-white hate, my bro?
See now, president making that one statement.
There you go. You got me to defend Biden. Holy shit.
That is the people in charge of the country reinforcing that statement and that theme every single day of the year, not just by their words, but with their deeds. What is this? Why does no one mention it's happening? Why does anyone who does mention it's happening get attacked as a white supremacist for complaining about racism? And maybe more important...
Exactly, as you were saying in your 300,000 view video, how come only white countries have to be diverse? Who else is sick and tired of anti-whiteism? I'm a white woman and have been pulled over for minor traffic violations. That means I have just debunked disbalanced treatment of black people by cops, because I have also been once stopped by a police officers. What an embarrassment of a president. There's not a damn thing wrong with being white. Yes, brother. Yes, brother. Yes, brother. Over here from the Balkans, I encourage pure whiteness indeed. DEI didn't earn it. Jared Tyler has been discussing this for 30 years. American Renaissance. America has become a dichotomy between those who can afford to hire a lawyer and those who can buy a judge. Diversity in Obama. That's why we are here. Obama! Obama! How dare you bring us here, Obama! Obama, goddammit!
Where does it go? Is there any other ending to the story but hurting people physically? Lots of people. Could we have a resolution that doesn't look like Rwanda? Jeremy Carl is an author who's thought a lot about this. He's got a brand new book called The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart.
Who will think of the whites, the unprotected class? Calling whites a class, additionally to this, fully continues to dilute the conversation that we should all be having, which is the class dichotomy, which through proper non-liberal or non-class exclusionary analysis completely connects between the two. But no. Whites are a class now, and they are being discriminated, my brothers and sisters. And I'll kill all wits out. That's so deep and funny.
Joins us now. Jeremy, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, he got him on. He got on. Yeah, baby.
Thanks so much for having me. It may be an advantage or maybe a disadvantage of being a little bit older that this is like the one thing you never thought, or I never thought you would see in America, which is our leaders openly attacking people on the basis of their race just 60 years after the Civil Rights Movement that supposedly taught us the opposite lesson in the Civil Rights Act. So how did this happen, do you think?
Yes, this is the same as back when black people didn't have civil rights. Now, they don't let white people into the bus. They don't let the white people into the same toilet as the blacks. They reject to hire white people because they are white. It is absolutely the same. Yes. It is. Martin Luther King is doing a helicopter spin in his grave from how much he's spinning. Yes, indeed.
Well, it's an interesting question, right? And I think you just hit on a key point, which is 60 years. We are as far now from the Civil Rights Act as they were basically from the Wright brothers. So there's been a lot of time that's kind of got a lot of water under the bridge since that time. And a lot of things have happened. And I think it was begun with very sincere intentions. But I think rather quickly, certainly 10, 20, 30 years down the line, it got really hijacked to the point that
so many white people all over the place are being hanged for being white. So many white people are being falsely accused of rape because they are white. So many white people are not allowed to buy property in particular places because they are white. So many, a lot of white people were arrested the other day for protesting a genocide over in Palestine. Is this the sort of anti-white we are talking about? The anti-white of we stop ignoring your race even as hardcore racist pigs when you are not on our fucking side of preserving the status quo, and in this case preserving an ongoing fucking genocide. That's when we start discriminating against so-called whites, because we no longer consider them whites, because at this point they are only the enemy and not our fellow white brothers sisters.
Went from trying to treat people equally to what has eventually amounted to reverse racism.
Reverse racism. I can't drop this microphone, but it is one of the first classics. Okay, we need to do a classics count. Thank you very much, Lord Tobacel, for the sub. Thank you kindly. Welcome, my friend. We need to do a count. So we had Martin Luther. What about Martin Luther King? Don't judge by race. Now we're judging by race. And now let's hear the other ding, 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 ding.
Trying to treat people equally to what has eventually amounted to reverse racism.
Reverse racism. Ding, ding, ding. Number 2. Let us go. Woo, we are on a roll, baby. Come on, Tucker. You can do better than this. My man. Come on. You can do better than this.
Right. Or just, I guess I would just call it racism because it seems like...
Okay. He fixed it. My boy. He never disappoints, man. He never fucking disappoints, okay?
Standard would remain the same no matter the race of the person being discriminated against. You can't attack people. You can't punish people for the color of their skin, for how they were born.
Yes, I agree. Now show me where there is large-scale discrimination against whites, where there is institutionalized discrimination against whites. Please show me, my dear friend.
So like that seems like a pretty easy principle to uphold. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, I would agree with you, Tucker, but it's, nonetheless, we're really seeing throughout, and this is what I really wrote the book about, throughout many different areas of endeavor, and whether that be when we're looking at how crime gets talked about, to what's going on in Hollywood, to the educational system and monuments coming down and everything you could imagine.
Yeah, the horrors of Hollywood having more black people, statues of insane colonialists going down. This is really hurting the everyday white man. We are so discriminated. God damn it, there's so many blacks in the fucking movies and the statues are going down. Like, he can't even think of other like examples. He can't like use one example of like a insane black person that went in and like specifically targeted 30 white people that they shot. But if we talk about insane white people doing that to black people, we would be here for 3 fucking months.
Kind of the white person is kind of the great enemy. It's the kind of the evil guy in 1984, the kind of 2 minutes of hate we have to have against him. The Emmanuel Goldstein figure kind of is the white person in particularly the Democratic Party's discourse today.
What's interesting, though, is that typically when you see these moments of scapegoating, which are clearly, kind of inherent to people, I mean, they pop up in every society at every time through history. Like, there's something in people that wants to separate a small group and like blame all its problems on that group.
New child soldier,
but it's usually it's the minority, of course.
Maybe it's going to take a while, just maybe, in a country that has been quite literally built on white supremacy for issues and jabs based on whiteness being thrown around to disappear when you have literally only started to answer the questions of systemic discrimination and racism against non-white people 50, 60 years ago. Surprise, surprise, it takes history a while for people to come back together after 2-3 centuries of hardcore discrimination. And us as white people, even though, my ancestors never fucking enslaved anybody and I don't live in the United States, but okay, let's put me in the group as well, need to be, a bit more quiet on this topic because of just how much insane, unhinged shit was done by people of our skin color in the past. And this will eventually be resolved, just like all things are resolved. But until we get there, this is not something that we should be running around and being pissy about, okay? Especially as actual discrimination is continuing against people of color, especially in the United States of America.
The persecuted minority. Whites are still, for at least as of today, probably change soon, of course, but they're still the majority in the country. So, like, have you ever seen anything like that happen?
I haven't, Tucker. It's kind of amazing to watch because this is...
What happened? They didn't say what happened. They said it is in Hollywood and they're bringing down monuments and this is anti-white hatred. What is happening? There's still a
58% majority. It's no longer a majority of the under 18, but of adults, it's still a solid majority. It's a super majority of our voters still in every presidential election.
Yeah, and maybe that's a problem that whites have, that like if you're like 1% mixed with anything else, you're not white. It says a lot about white identity as a concept of absolute purity. Like, race is a fucking concept. And if you want whites to increase, start categorizing more people as white and the problem goes away. And that literally shows just how insane of a concept by itself it is. Like you get to define who white people are. So white people define only the purest of so-called whites as white. And then there's less whites because they define whites in this incredibly strict manner. And then they're pissed that there's no more whites. But you said that nobody gets to be white. Except this very specific group of people that get to be white. And then there's less whites. And you're like, holy shit, why are there less whites? Because you made the definition of being white extra, extra hard in a fucking diverse country.
Although just barely in the last presidential election. And yet they've become this figure of hate. And it's really been kind of fascinating and disturbing to watch and to kind of think about why that happened. And one of the things I suggest in my book is that really ultimately this is a legitimizing ideology for ultimately resource transfer and resource confiscation. And that takes the form of some of this reparations conversation or land back or some of these other things. And they sort of start out on the extreme left and everybody goes, oh, well, that's silly. That's never going to happen. And then all of a sudden...
conversations are about land back are now, for some reason, anti-white and racist conversations about, hey, our country is based on colonialism and literally the most successful genocidal project to have ever existed, where we quite literally wiped a whole ethnicity off the face of the earth. So more radical conversations such as, hey, maybe land back, which are completely to be expected when, again, your whole country is founded on the principles of mass murder and extermination. So those conversations are always going to be brought up because that's what your fucking house is literally probably on a ground that has like 7,000 fucking Native American corpses underneath it. And that is going to be brought up. Of course that is going to be fucking brought up. How is that anti-white talking about history and talking about maybe how do we repair the past actions of colonizers? The only reason we are calling white is because because white people made such a big deal of white people being different than the other group. Like, you made this problem for yourselves. God fucking damn it, fucking sit in the fucking chair for a second. It's not you being discriminated. It's not even you being called out. They're just like normal, like basic fucking viewing of how history impacts our current identities and how we see each other. Doesn't make like modern day white people de facto evil and bad because of what their forefathers did. No, of course not. But that does not that does not stop people from bringing up what white people that you yourself define yourself as have done in the past. That is not saying that white people today are fucking insane. That is just saying, holy shit, you guys who define yourself as white did many insanely fucked up shit in the past on this fucking continent. And that is why we are talking about it. That in no way says that you're the... but you don't...
You know, it is happening and you're a racist if you think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, of course it's happened and it's still happening in other countries. You know, Rhodesia became Zimbabwe and the whites were killed and their land was taken and their money stolen. And it's happening in South Africa right now.
What? And why were the whites there? What was... the land was stolen. Okay. Great example. Tucker, I started this by saying like that you're the smart right-winger. God damn it, dude. Fucking, what the fuck, man?
Now, of course, we're not supposed to look at it, but it is happening, actually. I wonder why why the majority is putting up with it.
And yeah, the left's insane anti-white racism in the United States. Let's mention 2 African countries. Again, keyword fucking African countries.
Well, that's a good question, Tucker. And I can't even fully, I don't have a perfect answer for that myself. And ultimately, one of the main reasons I wrote this book is because I don't think anybody should be putting up with it, regardless of race. I mean, we shouldn't have,
I agree.
We shouldn't be putting up with racial discrimination in our society in 2024. But
yes, and all the examples of racial discrimination that you've mentioned is Hollywood movies, statues, and people talking about land back. Man, I would give my right arm to have your problems, my dude.
I think, you know, kind of white people, they're almost, it's like a Stockholm syndrome almost, where they're like
hardcore anti-Serbian Serbian discrimination in Bosnia after the war. Oh my God, who will think of the Serbs? Hardcore anti-Bosnian discrimination against Bosnians in Bosnia because of what they also did to the Serbs. Oh my God, who will think of the Bosnians? No, in the Balkans, we don't fucking frame it this way because it's absolutely fucking insane. We say, fucked up shit, your group did fucked up shit, my group did back in the day. Let's try and look at each other as normal fucking human beings in the eye without forgetting what unfortunately is historical fact of some shit that my people did to yours and vice versa. And then we continue with our fucking day. We don't call it incredible discrimination against one ethnicity because we da. But that's again because of the fucking insane definition of whiteness that you have in your country from the get-go.
In a hostage mode in terms of some of the ways that they're thinking, where they sort of are in love with their captors, and they're not able to kind of accept what's going on. And particularly on the left, it's this sort of notion that because
white people, Hakeem, but South African, there you go. We got a South African in chat. One of my favorite ones. White people here own 80% of the land while being less than 10% of the population, land that they slaughtered us while stealing. No, you don't know what you're talking about, Hakeem, but South African. There is great discrimination of the 80% land-owning population in the country. That's who's being fucked over, exactly.
We, of course, like every nation, have had an imperfect past, that white people have some hereditary blood guilt. And I think the balance of American history...
Hereditary blood guilt. It's not hereditary blood guilt to just fucking... It's not guilt to say that people that identify the same way as you did some fucking bad shit in the past. Nobody feels like guilty for it. You're unhinged if you to an extent do. What you're doing is you're accepting the fact that your privileges, racial privileges, are based on a lot of fucking atrocities which did what? They did happen. That is not self-hatred. That is reading a history book. You don't have to hate yourself for being German, for the Germans doing what we all know the Germans fucking did. You need to look at it through a normal fucking person's perspective and say what my forefathers did was absolutely fucking unhinged. And because of that, unfortunately, I get to sit and take some jabs from people from ethnicities and countries that my forefathers fucked up. That is not you hating your Germanhood. Even though that's a completely different conversation because Germanhood is an actual ethnic and cultural category, while white is what you fuckers invented and gate-kept so hard, and now are complaining about people who were gate-kept from it, from shitting on it.
Just shows that that's a really myopic and childish way to look at our history and our country.
Well, it's demonstrably absurd. If America is so racist, if systemic racism is such a barrier, then why are non-white people moving here by the millions? So obviously that's silly, but it's a little weird to say that, you know, you hate whites, but you need to live in a country founded by whites whose systems are Anglo systems. Like that, I mean, maybe I'm being too logical here, but it doesn't make any sense.
No,
but it's a little weird to say that, you know, you hate whites, but you need to live in a country founded by whites whose systems are Anglo systems. Like that, I mean, maybe I'm being too logical here, but it doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
Ding, 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 another system. Hey, you're coming to a white man's country, so you really like how the white man has established this country, and yet you hate whites, but you really want to live in an Anglo state, etc., etc. That doesn't even... It is an Anglo state because the Anglos came and killed everybody who was there and took it and then built a massive empire the size and wealth we have never seen before on the bodies and natural resources of both the Native American population and many populations around the world. The reason you're rich is because you took and you took and you took as a system and a state, not as a people. And now people want to go there because everything else, at least most places in the world, are a borderline fucking barren wasteland. They're not coming there because they want to live in sophisticated white culture, but because you took all the shit. All the shit's there. So they want to go to the shit, not to fucking what Chick-fil-A and cookies and tea.
I mean, it points.
No. As we all know, people migrate because they want to live in civilized white countries. That's the main reason we want to go there.
Because some of the absurdity here, and you also touched that, of course, people from all sorts of different backgrounds are clamoring at the door. We're right now dealing with this, of course, with illegal immigration. And even if you look at some of these groups, and again, something I discuss in the book, there are all sorts of non-white ethnicities in this country among immigrants and amongst...
And the whole point of the United States is like one of the rare positives is an actual international, to an extent, project, even though, everybody's being discriminated against, et cetera, et cetera. But it's because it's international, and those people can feel less as a foreigner there than if they migrate to, like, I don't fucking know, Macedonia, where it's just Macedonia is a bad example because it's a lot of Albanians, but to Greece, where it's just mostly Greeks, and then, you don't really have any international community there, and, the Greeks are going to notice that you're not Greek. They're going there also because it's very international, because of the very, it is, America de facto has American culture, okay? Not Anglo-Saxon culture, not white so-called culture, etc., etc. It's got this thing that you created because it became a melting spot between so many people, so many peoples and cultures, even as you have actively tried to stop it from becoming such.
Citizens in...
But no, they're moving there because it's America is white. Dude, tell any fucking proper fucking white European about America being white, they'll fucking die laughing and fall off the chair.
Which particularly among Asian American groups, but not exclusively. I mean, if you were to even look at Nigerian Americans, or particularly Igbo Americans, for example, they would have an average higher income than the average white American. And so this kind of notion that whites are sort of on the top is really a selective editing of any story, no matter how true, that belies that, or any statistics that belie that. It's one of the reasons you actually see Asian American.
Yeah, no, that happens because people get a better education locally, and then only the most educated and the most wealthy from the get-go, from, for example, the Igbo people from Nigeria, end up migrating to the United States and end up getting better jobs. Maybe your conversation needs to be about bettering the education system in the United States, which will elevate people to a level of professionalism that those people from these developing countries not necessarily can afford. Your very own white so-called Anglo-Saxon culture that you were previously defending gets cucked by immigrants who come and take your jobs because they're better at doing it. So maybe improve this Anglo-Saxon culture, or maybe, I don't know, listen to these Igbo people from Nigeria coming in and how they educate their own people and implement that into your culture. But no, that would be betraying the Anglo-Saxon fucking method and betraying your whiteness, which again is a fucking idiotic fucking concept.
Frequently eliminated from these comparison sets when they're talked about because it doesn't tell the story that the left wants to tell.
Well, it's just a lie. I mean, the Labor Department collects these stats, and you could say, well, maybe they're fake stats. Tell me how they're fake. But they've been, this trend has been going on a long time. I don't know if native-born whites are in the top 10 for income, actually, groups, but they're not near the top of the top 10, that's for sure. I've seen the numbers, I just saw them. So you're lying if you say that. So there's that. But again, I want to get back to the core question, which is why would anybody put up with this? If this were happening to people from Madagascar, I would be as against it as I am now. But it's particularly weird that the people whose ancestors founded the country are putting up with it. I hear all the time, young people say, well, I can't really get a job. I have no expectation of working in a big company because I'm a white male. It's like, why would you accept that? Like, if you're 22, what did you do to deserve that? And what does it say about your country that it's doing it to you? Like, why do people put up with that for a second?
I agree, Tucker. I mean, and I wrote...
But you do not ask why black men, when answering in the same way as this hypothetical white guy, why they have to put up with this shit and do something about it. Then it's holy shit, you're betraying white culture that has bred and fed you. You're a fucking traitor to what underpins American society, and that is whiteness. But we don't ask those. We only ask the guys that are potentially losing their privilege of just being handed fucking jobs just because they look like the boss. But I'm doing easy fucking gotchas here. It's too fucking easy. Tucker, I expected better. Expected more from this video. Some actual interesting conversation. But no.
This book, because I didn't understand that either. And the only thing I can come up with, or not the only thing, but the leading kind of hypothesis I can have is that...
Yeah, the space fair. We're so oppressed that we need to talk about it to thousands of people in our own media platform. Yeah, that's funded by fucking, tens of millions of dollars.
A lot of people have kind of been so brainwashed by a lot of the propaganda from the left that they're just simply not aware of some of the realities here. And so what I've tried to do in the book is just to detail the enormous number of ways.
And Nigerians, are literally 0.1% of the American population, and I love how every time they mention income and they mention like actual economic class, like the only thing we should be using the word class to refer to, they're comparing income levels on average between ethnicities, but they're not talking about wealth accumulation, wealth hoarding, the disbalance between owners and employees. No, we don't talk about this. We don't talk about this because that is commie bullshit. We only got to concentrate on why the people that don't look like me make more money sometimes than me.
Throughout many.
It's as if they're doing right-wing propaganda. This is absolute shocking, incredible. Guy who wrote a book about white discrimination is going to say this. Holy shit, chat. We are so shocked.
Many different areas of endeavor right now where whites are being discriminated against. And to say, hey, guys, we shouldn't be putting up with this. Why are we putting up with this? We certainly wouldn't put up with it if any other group were being discriminated against in this way. So why do we not have the self-respect to kind of stand up for ourselves?
In what way? We are still waiting to hear in what way they are being discriminated against.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And it's not that we wouldn't be putting up with it if any other group was.
Thank you very much, Ranka, for 200 bits. Unlimited destruction on the white labor aristocracy by the left. Meanwhile, the grifters all collecting stock dividends by tens of thousands. Exactly, my friend.
Being discriminated against is that other group would not be putting up with it. And you see that. And there are groups who just won't put up with it. And I say that with admiration, because why would anyone put up with racism? Especially since anti-racism, being against racism, is our state religion. So, I mean, how paradoxical.
Your state religion is capitalism, and capitalism will eventually even fuck you over with your great white identity. But if capitalism is in crisis, it will very much so militarize this white identity the way our beautiful man, Tucker Carlson, up in here is doing, in order for working class, black, Latino, white, everything, men, women, and NBs, from looking at the actual class dichotomy and concentrating on this fictitious hatred of the majority in the United States.
That in a country where the one thing you can't be is racist, that anti-white racism is enshrined in law, custom, and culture, and no one mentions it.
I agree. It's mysterious. And I think one of the encouraging things is when I started to write this book a couple years ago, and when I started even more thinking about writing this book a few years before that, a lot of this stuff felt very taboo to even mention, even though it's obviously, as you just noted, it's obviously self-evidently true, and therefore it shouldn't be taboo at all. And I think one of the encouraging things is that we're beginning to see people, and you've really been a stalwart on this, but there have been other folks in the media environment, folks like Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk, and there have been politicians, guys like J.D. Vance, who are kind of
Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk, the literal ultra racists that are fighting against anti-white discrimination, and Tucker Carlson as well. Great citations, my brother in Christ.
Kind of now speaking up, and they aren't just saying like, hey, it's fine. You know, you can just go discriminate against white people and that's fine. We're not going to say anything, or we're going to be too cowed. We're going to be too intimidated. I've really seen an improvement in the dialogue just in the time even I've been writing this book. But at the same time, there's still a long way to go before we really...
That is the beauty of right-wing rhetoric. You can just talk about like a fictitious fucking thing, and you can have two guys like shaking their heads and being like, yes, completely agree, man. This is really happening. This is absolutely really happening. And everybody's going to jump on board. Like, immediately, yeah, man, it's fucking absolutely fucking happy. Yeah.
Kind of reach a point.
Let's go clock back in and love my boss because he said we're family, you know. We got to concentrate on the blacks being hired instead of me.
Where we can have a candid conversation about this stuff that is actually based on reality rather than a left-wing fantasy.
I guess what...
My brother's talking about fantasies. Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah. Off. He's not to kink shame, but my boy is like 100% into cock and ball torture. 100%.
What bothers me a little bit is that, you know, the justification for hurting whites has always been effectively a species of the reparations argument. Like, you know, whites have hurt other people.
Thank you very much, Romka, again for the 200 bits. Tucker Carlson, America's chief anti-fascist like Dugin in my homeland. Exactly, yeah.
Well, therefore, it's their turn in the barrel or something like that. You need to make up for something that your ancestors did, I guess. But that...
No, nobody's talking about making up for anything. Just accepting that it happened. Accepting that it happened. That is not anti-white discrimination. It's just accepting that it happened. It's not anti-German discrimination to say that they were fucking Nazis. It's just not whitewashing history. There's a reason we have white in whitewashing. God.
I guess kind of works, sort of, maybe if you're talking about the majority. But the second whites are no longer in the majority, and that's going to happen very, very soon, maybe already has happened. We don't know because we don't know the real population numbers because of illegal immigration. But we're right on the edge of the whites not being the majority. Like at that
Again, because you yourselves defined what white is. I'm running in circles at this point.
point, do whites get to say, well, now I want, some advantage in college admissions. Now I want my kids to go to Harvard for free, and I want government contracts in a preferential way. Like, what happens then? Or does the anti-white hate just get louder?
Well, that's the concern. And I think one of the things, again, I talk about in the
I mean, there is no real parallel that you can make with this. I mean, I could make a joke, if like 5 million whites emigrate to China and, 2 decades pass and they become like 30 million whites and the Chinese are discriminating against its white population, and they can't get into colleges and so on. And China says, okay, we need to address this in some way. So we give a bit more leeway to white Chinese people entering universities. Would that be ethical or not? Of course, I believe it would be ethical to a very great extent, but the comparison is mute and cannot really be applied because China did not build its state on mass murder, genocide, and racism and slavery. That is the context, my dude. That is the context. That is America's culture. That is America's status quo. That is the people on whose backs the country was also built, including not only by the white settlers and so on. Therefore, it's like you can't really make allegories about, as he says, oh, if in Madagascar this was happening, I would also be making the same point. Because Madagascar wasn't created the same way that the fucking United States was created. You cannot make these fucking parallels.
Book is we are essentially moving, as you just alluded to what is effectively a post-white America. Now, how quickly we get that depends on whether Joe Biden ever decides that he's going to shut the border and whether the Republicans are ever actually going to do anything if he continues to refuse to. But we're headed in that direction. And so then the question becomes, when you look at the history of multi-ethnic countries where you have unequal resource distribution and whatever else, that is a recipe historically, not in every case, but in many, many cases, for violence. And so that should be of great concern to us.
Yeah,
and again, I'm not.
And why? Because you're afraid that when you become the minority, they will treat you the same way you treated them. If you weren't afraid of that, you wouldn't give a shit about who the minority or majority is. So maybe if you care about the interests of so-called white people, you should create a society in which, I don't know, this might be mind-blowing. This is like absolutely mind-blowing. I'm about to solve all of the world's problems. Maybe don't actually have a system, a hierarchical system of discrimination based on ethnicity. And then when the guys you're oppressing become the majority, won't have anything to go in revenge. But hey, I'm just, I don't know, living in a fucking utopia here.
I didn't write this book with the notion that, hey, we just are writing this for white people and white people should be the only one caring about it. Every American who is interested in living in what is going to be a multi-ethnic country that gives hopefully equal rights to everybody should be concerned about this issue. Because if we don't treat a very large group fairly, then there are going to be some people who just say, I'm not going to put up with that. And who knows where that leads, but not anywhere good, I wouldn't think.
Well, and you already see it at the margins. You don't want people to be radical.
I mean, we've seen where it leads. In the United States, it led to the civil rights movement, and they earned their rights. Even though you're still discriminating the shit out of them and you fucking kill them on the streets daily because they just look different, to an extent, they earned, through popular revolt and revolution to an extent, and reform, they've earned them. And that is a mechanism that you whites as a minority one day, I guess, can use as well. That is what can happen. And that is what has happened if you want to use fucking historical precedent. But no, of course, they want to use South Africa and Rhodesia as a historical precedent for what happens when the whites start getting discriminated, even though that context is completely fucking different.
You don't want people to
This whole piece is pretty much about, have you considered eugenics? Exactly.
have to be radicalized along racial lines because they're irresolvable. Opinions change, skin color doesn't. So if we have any kind of race conflict, it can go on for many generations, and has, of course. But I think about South Africa, which in 1994, when it...
Of course. There we go. This is the classic. Like, this is screaming at white people in the United States, saying that if you do not outbreed the mother, if you do not only exclusively breed with your own subspecies, the other subspecies are going to be the majority and they're going to do fucking heinous things to you. And why do you deeply know that they're going to do that to you? Because you think they're the same as you and will do to you what you have done to them. Okay, you need to be inherently racist. Like you, unironically, this is like you have to be inherently racist and inherently believe in core differences between ethnicities to think that if they become the majority, they will do violence on you only because they are the majority. This only comes as from being ideologically informed on the relations between ethnicities as one of dominance and submission. If you believe that race is so important that it only manifests itself, and culture is so important that it only manifests itself as one of superior majority stomping of the inferior minority, the only ideological conclusion that you can have is that when that minority becomes a majority, they will do the same thing to you. So it's de facto, it's just this whole premise is de facto race essentialist, and therefore, by race essentialist, I mean like thinking that race is a thing, okay, will de facto make you the one who suffers. It's just racist. This is just like old school racism with fancier words.
Was handed voluntarily to the ANC had nuclear weapons. And now parts of the country don't have consistent electricity. So the ANC's totally destroyed the country. It's a black party. And yet they're still blaming whites, the small minority of South Africans who are whites, for all the problems. And so you're thinking, well, if that's the future here, like that's very grim, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not so dire. I don't think, fortunately, things are so dire here that we're likely to wind up in a South African situation where they can't even keep the power on. But I do worry that we may be Brazilianizing our society, where you essentially have a few people kind of at the very top living with guards, kind of under a lot of security, and things are maybe kind of good for them. And everybody else is sort of, in a much worse sort of situation. And you kind of have
capitalism.
Certain types of very polarizing racial politics beginning even to emerge in Brazil as well. So I think, I'm not worried that we're going to turn into South Africa tomorrow because of that. But given America and given our history and traditions and the great beacon of freedom and opportunity that we've been for everybody.
Brazil mentioned, Brazil up in chat, Brazil mentioned, yeah.
To even take a step in that direction is just something that we should do everything that we can to hopefully avoid.
Yeah, I mean, I should say about Brazil.
And you can avoid it by creating a more just society where your actual labor results in your actual accumulation of wealth.
Brazil's had a pretty pyramid-shaped economic system for a long time, and I don't think that's a good thing. You want a middle class. But Brazil's a multiracial society, like way more than the United States. A lot of people from different ethnic groups, who intermarry and always have for hundreds of years. They haven't had, until pretty recently, like the last 10 years, hardcore American-style race politics. These have been economic arguments, which I think are fine to have, because your economic system can be changed with one piece of legislation. Your race can never be changed. So I don't understand the difference ideologically between, just ideologically, leaving aside resources and history and all that stuff, but like the ideas of like the Barack Obama Democratic Party seem identical to the ideas of the ANC or Malema in South Africa. Like, is there a difference that you see?
Well, I don't think there is. I mean, we're not yet at the kind of kill the Boer chant level of overt racism in South Africa that they have, although we're kind of heading maybe in that direction.
There was a book last year on Amazon. It was a bestseller. It was like Eliminate Whites. I mean, that was the name of the book, written by some Indian guy. What?
It's crazy. And I think certainly there's a lot of concern that we should have about the situation that we're in right now. But I'm not necessarily of the view that it's going to be quite as bleak as it currently is in South Africa. But what I do see is that some of this rhetoric is just incredibly toxic from the Democrats, that the direction that they would like to go is really of a sort of racial caste system, and that what we're going to kind of do as a result of that is going to be something that would be very, very bleak for every American. But
he's glitching. Like, he has no more points to make. Carlson is trying to push him into harping more on the Brazil question and more extreme ideas of, oh my God, we're gonna be executed like the South African farmers, yeah. But the guy is just like, his Venus is in retrograde. He's just fucking my NBC brain cannot process.
Certainly for white Americans,
the Dems bad. They be pushing whites to be lower in caste system.
Most of all, and again, we've got to start calling them out on this, because until if we were letting them get away with these sorts of lies of kind of police racially targeting African Americans and
oh yes, the famous lie that the police in the United States is not racially targeting African Americans.
America's history is nothing but violence and racism. Then
point at a part of it which was not deeply embedded in violence and racism. Please point. Let's see it.
It's going to be very, very bleak in terms of what things are going to look like in the future of this country.
And my last question, since I know you've thought about this more deeply than anyone probably, do you see this accelerating, or do you foresee, I'm saying prayers for this, a future where we're not talking about race that much because it's not that interesting, and we're talking about the things that unite us and the ways to make the country better? It does seem like this election year may be a potentially turning point or an acceleration.
Yeah, and the people on the so-called left that you harp on so much are trying to do exactly that by concentrating on class and class discrimination, which unites absolutely everybody, not dependent on gender, creed, or ethnicity, because that is the real eternal problem that underpins and underlines and connects absolutely every single inch of these problems. But no, and one can make a very valid argument that both the conservatives and liberals, which are the entirety of the political establishment of the United States of America, want to harp on race and will continue to harp on race more and more, because again, this is just a differing pathway towards forgetting the class question.
Which do you think?
Well, I think that the left is definitely accelerating. I mean, as it becomes less and less true to speak of any sort of white systemic racism, the left is just amping up their conversation about that, their rhetoric around that. At the same time, I think there is more resistance that I just touched on, and you others have really been in some ways at the forefront of that, which I'm very thankful for. But I kind of feel like the best case that's realistic is that, to use a kind of Cold War analogy, we move to what's called a mutually assured destruction, and that keeps us safe. So what the left has to understand is, when they use this type of racial rhetoric that is scapegoating whites, that is blaming everything on whites, that is saying white people are kind of the cause of all problems, or...
No, the left is not saying that. We're saying the capitalists. I don't fucking care if you're fucking pink, okay?
That are going on in this country, that they need to understand that there's going to be a very painful and direct political blowback to them for doing that. And that requires us to organize on our side to say, to actually arrange that type of blowback, to make them understand there are costs to that type of racist rhetoric that they're using. And then if that happens, they may say, well, okay, you know what? Maybe it's best that we kind of cool this off, that we don't use this type of rhetoric, that really what we want to do is sort of take...
But that's additionally insane, because they do not necessarily use that type of rhetoric, because why is there still the fucking majority and the Dems want to be fucking elected? Like, the only thing that the Dems only in rhetoric but never in public policy touch on is, cops be killing a disproportionate number of black people, and they address that, we need to help fund schooling for minorities in developing neighborhoods more than what the fucking Republicans harp on. Like, these guys are inventing a left that doesn't exist in the United States. It's just a bunch of fucking liberals and conservatives throwing catchwords at each other, and nobody at the end of the day, not even people of color that are in politics, necessarily even care about this question, because that's not the question that gets them elected. It's if you actually want to touch on these subjects, you need to critique capitalism as a concept, as a system. The status quo is a system, and that is the only thing that is not allowed in political discourse in the United States. That's why it is, again, a two-party system, which is only really a one-party system, and that is the party of capital.
Race out of the public dialogue in this way. We're not going to scapegoat whites anymore, because we understand that creates a politically painful scenario for us as well. But to create that sort of thing, which I think would ultimately lead to racial peace and would allow us to talk about these things that, as you note, would be much more important and things that we should all be caring about far beyond race, we need to be a credible a credible deterrent to them. We need to show that we're not going to put up with the sort of behavior that they've been engaging in. That's why I wrote my book, The Unprotected Class, and I sort of suggest in the book that ways that we can go to get there.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I remember watching the Republican governor of New Hampshire,
Wonderful,
Chris
a new
Sununu,
child soldier.
really
I mean,
not
subscriber.
an awful person, but say that the problem with New Hampshire was there were too many whites in it. I remember thinking, is anyone else hearing this? You're attacking people who live there, whose ancestors have been there for 300 years. You're attacking them because of their skin color? Really?
Hey, this one person that said something. Finally, we have an example. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have an example of somebody attacking somebody only because they are white. And it's some guy in some fucking city. Oh my God, we all need to get our pitchforks.
Reelected by Republicans. And so I hope your book increases the sanctions on people who use racist ideas for political gain, because I think it's wrong.
Tucker Carlson, 2024, Monday, 29th of April. I hope you attack people who use race for political purposes because I think it is wrong. Tucker motherfucking Carlson. The guy who top 5 reasons why he got kicked out of Fox, because there were many, was that he was making too many anti-Semitic remarks. Yes, indeed.
I agree, and I appreciate having the opportunity to go on and talk about it with you, and appreciate all the work that you've done to really highlight this issue over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine, by the way. You know what I mean? It's the principle that drives me crazy.
No,
but anyway.
I'm great. I'm glad, Tucker, that you mentioned that, because there's one of the things that they use to kind of try to shut us up is to say, oh, it's just whining. You must be a loser. You must have a terrible life if you're worrying about that. No, I actually have a fantastic life. Personally, I have a loving family. I'm really happy, 5 kids, but I'm looking at the future of our country, and I'm really concerned about the direction, and I'm concerned about my future for my kids, and not just for my kids, but for other kids of all different races in the U.S. I want them to grow up in a country of opportunity and a land of opportunity for everybody, which was the country that I really grew up in, but I think in many ways is becoming less true for everybody now if you don't kind of check the right demographic boxes. And so that's why I wrote the book, and that's why
Tucker and both this guy saying, after saying how whites are discriminated, they'd be like, man, I have a 10 out of 10 life, but this discrimination thing, we really should talk about it. But yeah, by the way, I have a 10